When you have completed knitting the upper back panel, the next job is to embroider on the vertical lines using Swiss darning. Before embroidering, it's a good idea to plan out where the vertical lines are going to be, referring to the pattern instructions as to which stitches, which lines of stitches are to be embroidered. I've used here just some little markers which I've slid through the stitches which are to be embroidered. Now, first of all, it's important to turn your work so that the cast on, or that where you picked up the stitches rather, is at the top and the cast off is towards you. This means that your knitting is actually upside down. However, because a knitted stitch is created from one leg that goes up and then one leg that comes down the other way, and that's repeated all across, even though this work now is upside down, you can still embroider over a V stitch, but this is actually half of one stitch and half of the stitch next to it, but that doesn't matter when we're embroidering. This actually means then that we have 91 stitches that we picked up, but there's actually 90 V's, i.e. stitches, available to us to embroider. If we look at the very edge of the work here, then, this being the correct way up, you can see that the edge stitch is going off here into the edge of the very edge of the work, sort of rolling over slightly. If we turn it this way, the way that we're embroidering, we need to find the first full stitch. In other words, half a stitch technically is rolling over to this side. This is the first full V, if you like, the first full stitch that we can see, and there will be 90 of these all the way across, not 91. Okay, so I've marked out where the stitches are going to be embroidered, and now I'm going to show you how to Swiss darn the stitches. So I'm going to my first marker here. I'm going to just remove that marker from the work, and I'm going to Swiss darn as follows. Make sure you use a blunt needle and leave yourself sufficient yarn. What you don't want to do is to run out halfway up the embroidery. So my very first stitch to Swiss darn is here, beginning after the cuddle yarn here where the moon begins. So I bring the needle in from the back of the work at the base of that stitch. Just pull the yarn through and leaving a short tail that can be darned in later. Then I take the needle across the middle of the stitch above. And then I take the needle back down through the base of the stitch. Now just note that I'm bringing that yarn through quite slowly. I'm not pulling on it too hard, and just to neaten it up, I just pull on those both ends, the tail and the yarn that I'm using to embroider, just to neaten up. And that's the first stitch Swiss darned. You then miss out, they're alternate stitches, so you miss the next V and you're going at the base of the alternate stitch above. Across the middle of the stitch above. Just pulling just sufficiently just to make that neat, not pulling too hard and also not leaving it too loose. So what you're aiming to do is to cover the stitch which is underneath the embroidery so that it looks like a knit stitch, a perfect knit stitch. So that stitch I'm not embroidering, miss that one out, go into the base of the next alternate stitch up, which is actually, if you like, through the middle of the stitch above the one that you're embroidering. And you're embroidering in this way all the way, every vertical line that's Swiss darned, you're embroidering in this exact same way, putting that yarn through nice and slowly so that the embroidered stitch sits neatly on the work. And you continue repeating this all the way to the very last stitch that you can embroider before it joins the front panel.